Welcome to the 2022 Falkirk Model Railway Show, held at the Grangemouth Stadium over the 19th and 20th of November. In all, there were 28 layouts on display. I've split the videos into 3 parts. This is part 2 of 3. Each layout has its own YouTube chapter mark, which means if you expand the description, you will be able to jump to a specific layout. I'm here now on an N gauge track called Roxby Town, and I'm here with Martin, who can hopefully give me a bit more information on what the layout's all about. What was the inspiration behind the layout, Martin?
Basically just to put something that's pleasing on the eye, something that's with this S shape. It just looks better when you're running the trains, and the split levels. Everybody always seems to like the split levels. It's based on a freelance design. The buildings from Scunthorpe at the other end, we've changed it a little bit this year. We put the power station in, and we put the Premier in, and the tax office from Scunthorpe at that end. But basically we don't do a lot to it, to be honest. It just runs forever, and we love operating it. So it's bang up to date as we can, basically. We have all the new repaints that come out. It's 12 foot, yeah, by about.
And how many boards is that?
Just 3. And it's very easy to put up. It's what we call plug and play. It's all self-contained within the actual baseboards, and just the connector leads to put in. So we can knock it down in about half an hour at the end of the day, so it's dead easy. It sits in a cradle in the car.
Was it DCC or DC?
It's DC. All on, you can see on the control panel there, it's all isolators.
And how many operators would you normally have on it?
Normally have 3 on. So 1 on the up and down lines, and then somebody operates the yard.
What about your scenery? What's that, scratch built? Or?
Premier Inn, that's a bespoke build for us. It's Pico sheds on the actual shed itself, and these are bespoke. I think Jeff made the back scene ones here. The scenery set as autumn, which we like, just something different to everybody else, really.
I notice it's not actually on a level. There is an incline on the track, is it?
Down to the shed, yeah. But that gives it that pleasing look on the eye, sort of thing, as you're going down the slope into the sheds.
It's all mainly Farish, is it? Or?
Yeah, a bit of Dapol, a bit of Revolution. Just whatever runs well for us, basically. So.
And your track work, what's that?
It's all standard Pico straight out of the box. And we found it runs superb for us.
And your points, what are they?
They're all Pico with standard Pico point motors underneath. Again, they give us brilliant service.
Great, thank you very much.
No problem.
Appreciate it. So you join us now on Bellwood Yard, and I'm here with John, who's going to tell me a little bit about it. So what was the inspiration behind all this?
I bought an American O-scale loco. Had it running on a test track for a while. I'd built point work, didn't have anything for it, and I thought I'll combine the two, build a wee layout, and it ended up being 13 feet long. So I've got a wee layout. It's based on Chicago, the Bellwood area in Chicago. There is actually a small yard there.
What sort of area is it?
It's round about sort of 2000.
So how many boards is it?
3 boards and 2 smaller extensions that got added as I realised it wasn't quite long enough.
What's the control? The DCC or DC?
It's DCC, it's lens that I use for the operating system, so it's all wired underneath. The points are all done through lens commands as well. So
where you normally get your stock from?
Wherever I see it, it's just pick it up. If it looks at a reasonable price and it looks like it would run on the layout, then that's fine.
You're
loosely based on some of the industries that are actually round about the Bellwood area.
The scenics, where are they, kit built or scratch built or what?
Everything's scratch built. There isn't a kit built building on this layout.
How many people would you normally use to operate it?
Usually 2.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. So you join me now on a layout called Griffen Road, and I'm here with Stephen, who's going to hopefully answer a few questions for me. What was the inspiration behind the layout?
The inspiration behind the layout was the port revere, and this is what you get, and it's essentially a modern image layout, and it's, I suppose, a dock layout with a maintenance depot and a fuel depot as well.
And what size is it?
I think it's about 22 foot by 3.5 foot.
And how many boards is that?
1, 2, 3, and a fiddle yard as well.
And what's the control? Your DCC or
It's lens DCC, and the points are controlled by the lens system as well.
And so operating, is that done with, how many operators would you normally have?
Two operators, sometimes 3. Usually one in the fiddle yard, one for the fuel depot and the maintenance depot, and one for the station. Sometimes two minimum, 3 max.
And your scenery, is that kit built or scratch or what?
The person that built it all himself, so that would have been Mike Bartle.
And what about the track work? What's that?
It's code 75 throughout. It's DCC with the points, yeah, and it's just normal Pico points throughout, and everything's controlled via the lens system. So he's got a strange way of controlling them. Each point's got its own unique number. Even the signals work as well via the lens system as well.
Right.
So it is pretty good for a small layout. It's actually he did design it in such a way that the person up at the fiddle yard can operate it all the way into the station, and then take the trains back out from the station, and the individual operating the fuel depot and the sidings can operate them independent of the station entirely. So it is pretty self-sufficient and contained. So it is a reasonable attempt to imitate the docks and keep the passengers separate from the freight.
Great, thank you very much. Here on the St Adrian stand, and this is an unusual one. It's Z Gauge, and I'm here with Aaron Aird, who's going to tell me a little bit about it. So Aaron, what's the inspiration behind this?
The southwest of Switzerland was the inspiration behind the layout when it was built. I mean, the guy that came up with the idea was a guy called Alistair Hay. He's been long passed away now, but we've kept the layout going because it's unique and it's popular. You know, it's also easy for us to take out to shows, believe it or not. But
so Z Gauge, what actually is the actual gauge of the track?
Track's 6mm. I think it's 6mm. But the scale is 1 to 220. Markland did this at the time when everybody else was going N Gauge, so they decided we'd go one better, as they thought. So, I mean, technically, some people, it is the smallest commercial gauge that's practical.
Z Gauge is not something you see in Britain, so is it unusual to get hold of stock, or can you still get hold of it?
Most of the stock, you can get hold of it. I mean, eBay's a great place if you're wanting to get it quick. You might pay over the odds for some things, but it's about keeping your eye out what's coming out and when it's coming out, and there's some shops on the continent do it at reasonable prices. I mean, it is Markland, and so it's going to be dearer, but you get what you pay for. You won't, if you ever come to sell your stock, you won't lose on it in years to come.
So where do you get your track from?
Most of the track, all the flexi tracks, Pico, they do a flexi. The curves at the end were all laid with Markland, and the points are Markland. Now, they're not the best looking points in the world, but I believe at the time when Z Gauge came out, Pico agreed that they wouldn't do point work.
What about control? It's just DC, is it?
Yeah. I mean, there is some people, I believe, done DCC, but you know, what's the point? turn the button and away it goes. You know, you can read the number on the logo. You're a better man than me.
And what about control? Do you need operation? Do you need more than one person, or can one person work?
Just one person's all you need. One person's is ample. You let the trains go a couple of times round, and set the next one going. Well, you could, in theory, have 12 trains on the back if you wanted, but we just run it with 6. That's enough to keep the public entertained.
Thanks very much. You join us on a layout called Burdock, which is N Gauge, and I'm here with Dave, who's the builder. Dave, what was the inspiration behind all this?
The Stroud to Swindon line, which is very picturesque. I've always been fascinated by it because of the way it curves through the countryside. It's a very wooded area. It follows a valley.
Is there an actual place called Burdock?
No, that's just something I came up with, and I borrowed the name from Laurie Lee's Cider with Rosie, because Rosie's surname was Burdock, and this is the sort of area that book was set in, so it seemed appropriate.
Okay. What era is it set in?
1964 summer, which is just before most of the stations on the real line closed.
Right. Okay. How big is it?
12 foot by 3.
How many boards is that?
6.
6. So you've come up in a van, have you?
No, in 2 cars.
2 cars, okay.
Yeah.
It makes life a bit easier, probably, I think, if you're in a car.
Yeah. Yes. It's also easier if you've got the 2 cars. You can, in theory, get it all in one, but it's a bit of a crap.
What about the control of it? Is it DCC or DC?
It's DC.
Right. And what's the track work?
The track's all Pico, code 55. And the fiddle yard is semi-automated, so the track setting is just one push of a button, and everything, all the points get set automatically.
Right. So have you got anything in that helps you with that? You've got
There's a load of electronics under the board. The thing's mainly operated by 2 nano Arduinos.
Okay. What about your scenery? What's that?
That's all down to me, mainly. There's something like 450 trees on it, all of which are handmade. Buildings are a mixture of ready to plant and scratch built.
Okay. What about your stock? Where's that from?
That's from all the normal suppliers, Farish, Dapol.
What about the operation of it? How many normally would you have?
We've normally got 4 people, 2 operating, and then 2 spare available to talk to visitors.
Right. Okay.
My name is Ray Knowlton, a lifelong model railway enthusiast. I'm a member of the East of Scotland 4mm group, which is an area group of the Scaleforce Society. Our main layout, which you may have heard of, is Burnt Island 1883, but we have a variety of other layouts owned by individuals. And this is my layout, United Mills, which is built to P4 standards. It's what they call a cameo layout, and that represents a small scene, in this case an industrial scene, of a mill somewhere in the Kelty Cowdenbeath area. The layout is fairly simple, consists of 2 turnouts and a fiddle yard at either end. It represents a foundry metalworking facility coming towards the end of its life. The reason it's kept its rail connection is because of the poor road connections. Traffic is worked by BR locos and also by United Mills locos, and features a variety of traffic. The layout is DC, very simple. The turnouts are operated by hand-operated Blue Point units underneath the baseboard. The track has 1 single feed, set of isolators. The uncouplers are electromagnets, and the couplings themselves are Alex Jackson couplings, which are used quite frequently by members of the Scaleforce Society, which allows automatic uncoupling wherever you've fitted a magnet. The trackside buildings are mostly scratch built, and in fact the layout was inherited in a modern image style from a gentleman in Edinburgh, and I got it as a bare board with just the track and 2 of the buildings, and the rest of the scenery I've done myself. The main mill building is based on a building that still exists, the old granary in Duns, The layout is set somewhere between late 50s and early 60s. The back scene it looks very similar to the Lomond Hills, although in fact it's the Brecon Beacons just behind Hereford, but it is very, very similar to what you would see if you're driving up the M90.
So you join me on a layout called Castle Caerinion, is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
And I'm here with Martin, who hopefully will give me a little bit more information about the layout. So what was the inspiration behind it?
It goes back a long time from visiting, calling in at the railway on the way to the Welsh coast many, many years ago. We used to stop in the station yard for a cup of coffee on our way on holiday.
And you've modelled it in 009 gauge, is that right?
009, that's right, which is 4mm to the foot and 9mm gauge to get the narrow gauge effect there.
How big is it?
It's 8 foot long in total, and each board is only 1 foot wide.
What about control? How do you control it?
It's points are wire and tube, and the main control is just straightforward DC using a Morley controller.
Your scenery, is that kit or scratch?
It's mostly scratch.
Certainly the trees look very impressive. Are
They're
they all scratch built?
all scratch built. It's based on twisted wire, painting the trunks with wood glue to thicken them up a bit.
Where do you get your track from?
That's hand built.
Is it?
It's Code 40 rail, which I get from the Steel Mill Fine Scale Society, and the sleepers are walnut strip that come from Cornwall model boats.
What about your stock, or is that hand built?
It's a mixture of kit built and partially hand built.
My name's Craig. This is Glasshouse Lawn. It is an O gauge layout set in the late 70s to mid 80s, based on what would have been had the railway possibly still been open into Alloa at the time. It's got 4 baseboards. They're all laser cut plywood, including the fiddle yard as well, so the baseboards are a kit as well, so there's been no I've not had to do any carpentry myself. It all comes as a kit, including the legs as well, which is really easy. The whole idea for the layout was, I've never had O gauge before. I was quite interested in starting off in O gauge. I bought a Dapol 08, I bought some track, and then it sort of grew from there. The track is all Pico track, so it's all ready to run, Pico streamline track and O gauge. The buildings are a mixture of resin and plaster cast buildings from Skytrex and Ten Commandments. The rolling stock that runs on the layout is a mixture. There's some Dapol locos, some Helljan locos, mostly ready to run. There are some kit-built wagons on the layout as well. The control system's a Digitrax DCC system. I use it on my HO layout at home as well, so I've got all the different components of it, so I was able to get some extra components for this layout as well. It took approximately about a year from start to finish to build it. It isn't really finished yet, but to where it is at the moment, it's been about a year and just over a year to get it to this stage.
So I'm here with Ryan now on the layout Wenstead. So what's the idea behind the layout then?
The layout was something to do because I had itchy feet to do another layout in the club after building my layout Eden Road. And I got one of the guys in the club to make a couple of boards up. I'd bought a range of GWR stock that I wanted to do something with along the lines of China Clay. I decided to invest in some more GWR stock and set the layout somewhere in the West Country. So it's got a range of 158s and 150s, 153s of GWR themselves that come into a terminus island station. There's a servicing point for DMUs operated by GWR themselves, and it's GWR as in the present day operation, not from the 50s or earlier. At the rear of the layout there's a small DB depot. DB is quite prevalent in the southwest, operating the China Clay trains, aggregate and other assorted items. So there'll be a range of class 60s, 66s, also China Clay wagons in for maintenance. It is the scenic section is 5 feet and the fiddle yard is 4 foot, and that's a hidden fiddle yard. Yeah, it'll fit in the back of a regular car. The boards have been done that way because I wanted to be able to transport it by vehicle to shows rather than rely on hiring a van. I think we started it about August and just been working on it a couple of nights a week. Boards were fairly quick to put together, track work's been done, and then what we've been working with Steve is doing the wiring.
What track are you using?
It's Pico Code 75. We're using concrete effect track for the main line into the station plus the fueling point or the servicing point, and then the depot is wooden sleepers because we don't think a depot would be upgraded to use concrete sleepers based on... At the moment it's one man just from a restriction from the controller point of view, but the intention is to have a handheld controller with the lathe as well. So what will happen is the yard will be operated by one person from DB's side of it, and then somebody can work the main line with the other handheld, and that includes obviously the DMUs coming in and out and the servicing point as well. And the two tracks operate independently, so they're not physically linked at the front or at the back. So if I want to move something from one track to another, it's a case of lifting it out and changing it over.
Okay, I'll speak to Steve now. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Well, what we're using is the Zephyr, Digitrack Zephyr, which is the basic model, and 2 bus bars down with droppers on every single track. Then we've got point control modules, there's a Digitracks on the fill yard board, and that's actually setting route settings, DCC concepts on the main sealing board. And we're using Pico point motors as well, just the usual solenoid start motor.
And they're located underneath the board?
They're all located underneath.